Ask AJ. So let's talk about number two. So number two, you mentioned security, and you and I were both in the business when HIPAA was enacted. I was on the payer side at the time, and I can just remember all the struggles that specifically, you mentioned small practices or individual physicians, maybe even in a rural setting, struggling with trying to interpret appropriately what a HIPAA allowable instance was to be able to share data. And we're nearly 20 years from that now, maybe a little more. Trying not to
Yeah.
don't want to reveal too much about our age, but we're quite a bit away from that. And you made a point earlier that HIPAA in a way has had almost a stifling effect on the ability to do things from a technology perspective, specifically if you're working with a partner, if you're working with an outside organization, in that the HIPAA so often was used as a reason not to do something, right?
Yeah.
You and I have both been there. It's you bring an idea, you bring a potential type of software, and the hoops you have to go through to try to prove it from a HIPAA perspective almost makes it not worth the effort to go into. And so I think a lot of things get stifled and get killed. And that's not to minimize the importance of this data protection. The one thing that I would say and that I think is interesting is if you look at the generations below us, our kids, right? They're concerned about data privacy. And, we hear all the time about data getting hacked and getting used and so on. But I don't know about your kids, but my kids are so much more open to sharing information, whether it's on, TikTok, I guess is the big thing now, but TikTok
Right.
and their social media stuff, that I don't know that they take this protectiveness with the same level of severity that perhaps we did or our parents did or other generations did. And I'm wondering whether or not now we need to take a serious relook at the HIPAA legislation, at high tech, which followed on afterwards, which was really designed to recognize how cloud was growing and trying to encourage perhaps the use of cloud in some way, shape, or form. But I think it's time for us. It's time for our legislators maybe to take another look at HIPAA and say, okay, how can we protect that data, but then recognize that we're living in a world where maybe constituencies aren't quite as concerned about that data protection as they were in the past.
Yeah. There's a lot changing, right? And a great example just happened this week, right? The new iPhone I watched 6 came out, and it's got amazing health capabilities built in, right? It can take your EKG. Before, you'd have to go to the office and get hooked up, and 36 little sensors all over you, and then this machine prints out thermal paper, right? Would come out of this machine, and there's your EKG, and the doctor holds it up, and the doctor's like, sinus rhythm, right?
Yep.
And all that can now happen from your Apple iWatch 6, right? And I'm not plugging Apple, but really they've been kind of ignoring all this legislation, right? To your previous point, they didn't allow it to be an obstacle. They said legislation's going to catch up, right? Like we're going to find the fix to all this privacy stuff. In the meantime, we know it's beneficial for AJ to have his EKG on his watch. We know that eventually in the future, not now for sure, but you will have somehow the ability to give that to a provider, right?
Yeah.
We're getting to the point where your iWatch will tell you if you are demonstrating, symptoms that are going to lead to a cardiac event, and will notify you. Who wouldn't want that?
Yeah.
Something on your wrist to tell you, hey, you need to go seek medical help right now because these EKGs that you've been having are indicative that you're about to have a cardiac event.
Yeah.
Sign me up. I'm all in. I think the new generation that you're alluding to that's coming up is all in too, right? Everybody's all in on that, and we still have folks that are, well, what if that gets out of control? My EKG gets out, like somebody sees my okay, and I think there's the younger generations coming up. They care a lot less. I still think they care about data security as far as like their personal information. We're seeing, again, pointing back to kind of the social unrest happening in our country. They care more about those social economic issues than they do perhaps 20 years ago, where we cared about, we got to protect the health information.
Yeah.
I think we're seeing a bit of a paradigm shift there, which hopefully leads to some of the roadblocks around data security coming down. Oftentimes, IT would just be able to use that as a card and go, oh, well, data security, information security, high tech,
Yeah.
And they'd throw it around, and then the ideas would just die, right? You could never get over the wall of somebody saying HIPAA. You were just like, okay, I guess I'll go do something else. And it really stifled the innovation in healthcare. People just got frustrated, and they didn't give up, but and obviously Apple's a great example of that, right? They just pivoted and kind of went around the wall or dug under it. So there's definitely that need, and I think we're seeing a new cadre of data security professionals that, as it's become much more of a profession, right? There's now college degrees in data security. So I think they're understanding that their role isn't to be a roadblock. Their role is to partner with the client and really figure out, how do we go on this journey together, and how do I encrypt and enable and secure it all the way? And as cloud continues to proliferate, that becomes a little more complex, because it's no longer within just your firewalls, right? Or your four walls, if you will. It's not in your data center downstairs. Now it's in the cloud. Now you're trusting companies like Amazon and Microsoft and Oracle to protect it. And then where does it go from there? And you lose visibility very quickly. And that's where, the risk goes up, and then people are resistant, right? Because of the penalties. So,
yeah. Well, and I think, looking back at our discussion about interoperability, this generation or the generations at play today are into information on demand, right? They want the information that they want, and they want it right now and as easily obtainable as they can possibly get it. And so I think that's going to drive. It's going to have to drive some changes in the way that we view the way we secure health data. I mean, you were talking about security professionals. I mean, back in the day, if you found a security guy who was who didn't just tell you no, but actually helped you try to solve the problem you were trying to solve, they were worth their weight in gold, right? Yeah. And so I think, and now you're seeing more and more of these health apps being approved by the FDA. I mean, the one you mentioned from Apple was just recently approved by the FDA, and there are more and more of those that are happening. And it is not an implicit, to me, it's a very explicit acknowledgement that people want to be able to do these things. They're okay with that information getting uploaded to a website or uploaded somewhere for their provider to be able to view remotely. I think the whole telehealth debate that we're having right now, it is another example of that, right? I mean, part of the limitations on telehealth was always security issues. It needs to be someplace where there's no one else around, so we don't want it in your house. We don't want it over the internet. Well, that limited the usefulness of the technology so significantly. And COVID is proving that, hey, look, people are okay with getting on a web call with their provider and having a conversation about their condition. They are. And if they're doing it at home and the families are there, they're fine with that. So I think a lot of attitudes are changing, and I think we're going to continue to see, I hope we continue to see, we should continue to see a recognition that we've got to rethink data security and the way we protect that data uh, a little more than what we've traditionally done over the last 2 to 3 decades, because in today's world, people are demanding that flexibility, that ease, that comfort,
Mhm.
and the convenience of being able to get things on demand.